Hi everyone. In my last 3 podcasts, I've outlined a little of what life was like in New Zealand prior to when the treaty was signed at Waitangi. I also described how those Māori who signed Te Tiriti understood that they were agreeing to British government of both Māori and Pākehā throughout the land. Their hope was that the new governor would act as a wise father to settle disputes and bring peace throughout the land, and that he would also bring an end to the lawlessness of many of the Europeans visiting or living in the land. This was to prove overly optimistic, as the new government was not given the resources that would be needed. There were also differences between Māori tikanga and British common law that would inevitably lead to future conflict. Britain had been very reluctant to colonise New Zealand. Its colonies had not been profitable, and the Opium Wars were a major distraction as Britain was trying to balance its trade for Chinese tea by forcing the sale of opium to the Chinese. So, when Britain didn't provide the resources needed to ensure effective government of the land, the governor funded the colony by requiring that Māori would only sell land to the Crown for a much lower price than the Crown would then on-sell to the incoming settlers. When the new governor, William Hobson, decided that the Bay of Islands was too remote, he took advantage of the paramount Ngāti Whātua chief Apiwha Tikaua's offer of land in the Waitemata for his new capital. When Hobson ordered government customs levies to replace the anchorage fees that had been charged directly by the northern tribes, this undermined the economic base for Ngāpuhi. Honi Heke and Kawiti rebelled. Heke symbolically cut down the flagpole at Kororeka 4 times. After the battles that followed and the following stalemate at Ruapekapeka, both Heke and the new governor, George Grey, declared victory. A week later, Grey issued a pardon to the Northern Māori and didn't attempt to confiscate any land as compensation. However, the British learned an important lesson. Māori could not easily be beaten. Ngāpuhi had been divided in their support for Heke and Kawiti, with Tamati Wakanini supporting the government forces. However, the nation's economic activity then shifted from Northland to Auckland, and the net result was an economic loss for the region and the largest iwi in the country. After George Grey took over from Robert Fitzroy as governor in 1845, he was determined that his new capital at Auckland could never be attacked as the first capital at Russell had been. Between 1847 and 1852, he set up a ring of outlying villages to protect Auckland and employed large numbers of retired British soldiers called fencibles to live there. Each soldier had to be under 48 years old and of good character. They were required to do military exercises for 12 days each year. These new villages were Howick, Panmure, Otahuhu and Onehunga, and they are now suburbs of Auckland City. In 1849, Grey sold the now disputed Ihumateo land in Mangere to Te Wherowhero. He, along with 149 warriors from his tribe, were employed as were the British fencibles, with Te Wherowhero guaranteeing protection of the fledgling Auckland capital from attack by Northern Māori. Te Wherowhero was the leading chief of the Waikato Federation of Tribes, not just a rangatira, but also an ariki of both Tainui and Te Arawa descent. He was also a powerful general and warrior who, together with Ngāti Maniapoto, had driven Te Raparaha out of Kawhia, had forced a peace settlement with Ngāpuhi, and driven the Taranaki tribes out of Taranaki. While Te Wherowhero had refused to sign the treaty, he supported the settlers in Auckland and accepted being under the Queen. However, he expected to be on an equal level with the governor. After all, he was their protector. Te Wherowhero had a close friendship with Governor Grey, as described by Pei Te Herenui in his book King Patatau. Quote, George Grey came as the new governor. He and Te Wherowhero became firm friends. George Grey used to enjoy his stay among the Tainui chiefs and often spent weeks on end with Waikato and Maniapoto men of rank. He learned much of the mythology and traditions of the Māori race from them. Te Herenui then adds, Sir George Grey also took much interest in Te Wherowhero's son and heir, Matutira. Te Wherowhero and his son were often guests of the governor on Te Kaua Island. After a rocky start in Northland, the future was looking much better in the Waikato and Bay of Plenty. By contrast with the Bay of Islands, the Waikato had very little contact with European settlers in the early 1800s. Alfred Brown began missionary work for the Church Missionary Society in 1835 and became respected amongst the local Māori, where he had some success in gaining converts and establishing peace between warring tribes based in Matamata and Mangatotiri. In 1841, John Morgan and his wife established a mission statement at Otafo, now Te Awamutu, where he encouraged economic development for local Māori based on the following 7 principles. 1. The conversion of the natives to the Christian faith. 2. To foster the growing of wheat and the erection of flour mills. 3. With the profits from these, to encourage the purchase of cattle. 4. The establishment of schools. 5. The erection of brick ovens in all villages and the baking of bread. 6. To instruct the women in the arts of weaving, knitting and spinning. 7. To promote health and comfort and the erection of board houses. By 1844, the area sown in wheat was so extensive that local Māori were able to pay to have their first flour mill built. This success resulted in the surrounding tribes pleading for help so that they could do the same, laying the foundation for the golden age of the Waikato that followed. When James Shepherd arrived with his wife and 2 young children in 1854, he was employed by John Morgan to teach in Te Awamutu. His wife kept a diary of their experience when they moved to Mangatotiri to set up a trading business. She described how they were made to feel welcome by the local Māori, who were both very hospitable and industrious. In her words, and I quote, I was the first Englishwoman that had ever been to Mangatotiri. Everything in my dress and appearance was freely commented on, and in very flattering manner. It was kapai to everything. I could see that I would not want for servants. One girl took my baby, and another carried the boy to see all the wonders. These were the good days, when Māori were unspoiled and had not learned the evils and deceit of what we call civilization. They were always courteous and never thought of coming into the house without an invitation, but would sit outside and talk to you there. She continues, the Maoris at Mangatotiri were very industrious. From our door we could see the corn and wheat fields, the crops growing so high that when I walked along the paths leading to their villages, I was hidden in the rich grain. While my husband was away, I endeavoured to learn all the Māori I could. Before we were to leave Mangatotiri, both my husband and I were expert linguists. And she finishes by saying, at last our goods arrived, and we commenced business in earnest. It was a delightful life. While such positive experiences were certainly not true throughout the rest of New Zealand, it demonstrated the potential for Māori and Pākehā to live in harmony. John Morgan had been successful in planting the seeds of Christianity. His 7 principles had a positive effect on the local tribes. Beer and Gascoigne, who wrote this book, also described an unintended impact from the missionary teaching. For pre-European Māori, the chief's role was preeminent. Teaching that all men were equal had the effect of undermining chiefly mana and opened the way for all members of a tribe to act independently. The golden age of the Waikato began after the capital was moved to Auckland in 1840. Over the next 16 years, the Waikato region became the food bowl of the new colony. By then, missionaries like Alfred Brown had been active in the Waikato for several years, and Māori were quick to learn farming and horticulture, as well as the basic literacy and numeracy necessary for trading. Using money gained from trading, they employed European tradesmen to build flour mills, and the different hapu competed as to who was the more prosperous. The many Waikato hapu worked together with a high degree of unity, most likely formed during their combined resistance to the invasions by Northern Māori during the Musket Wars, as well as from their joint invasions of Kawhia and Taranaki. Waikato Māori were focused on building their own economy and were successful in doing so. In the early 1820s, well before Europeans first began visiting the Waikato, local Māori were already growing introduced European crops like potatoes, maize and pumpkins. Pigs, followed by horses, sheep and cattle, were used for intertribal trading. By the 1840s, the introduction of new crops generated a thriving trade based on exporting produce to Auckland, Australia and elsewhere. Māori were dominating shipping during this time. The development of this thriving agricultural economy required substantial capital investment in carts, schooners and mills. During his first term, Governor Grey made loans available to Māori for this purpose, and Māori used the loans to good effect. By the early 1850s, the village of Atafo, near present-day Te Awamutu, had over 1,300 acres of land in cultivation, along with horses, cows, ploughs, drays, carts, and a flour mill. The Surveyor General, Charge Liger, observed in 1852, and I quote, "Any recently arrived visitor to the district was likely to be subjected to close questioning on the prevailing price of pork, wheat, flour, and flax. He also noted that the old persons may be seen in groups around the evening fire, chatting about the appearance of crops and all subjects relating to them. And the most engrossing subject that could be broached is the relative merits of 2 mill sites, oval or undershot wheels. There were schools, churches, and neat wheat fields stretching as far as the eye could see. There were horses and carts, cattle, peach trees and wildflowers. Māori may have started as a primitive Stone Age people, but they learned fast and were well on their way to what we call civilization. However, beginning in 1856, this prosperity was undermined by the collapse of the Australian market for potato and wheat. At that time, Australia enjoyed a bumper harvest and the prices crashed. And Māori were left overburdened with debt from their investment in mills, horses and ploughs. When Māori were not being paid what they expected for their produce, they abandoned their plantations and left them to go to waste. This might have been just a temporary aberration, except for the rapid influx of European settlers and their demand for more land. The resulting disputes over land in Taranaki would eventually lead to a war that would destroy this whole economy. And there was another source of intense dissatisfaction and loss of trust: the failure of the new government to implement law and order over both Māori and Pākehā. This, combined with Māori's increasing reluctance to sell more and more land, led to the rise of another powerful force, kingitanga. I will cover this in my next podcast.